The galaxy was wide, ancient, and filled with countless civilizations. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had ruled with confidence. They believed they understood every race, every culture, and every world under their influence. Their fleets patrolled the trade routes, their laws reached distant colonies, and their authority was rarely challenged. But even in a galaxy that claimed to know everything, there were shadows. There were corners of the star maps marked as unimportant or primitive, and among those forgotten stars was a system called Sol. The humans lived there. To the Council, humans were little more than a rumor. Reports described them as reckless, emotional, and dangerously stubborn. Some aliens compared them to fire, bright, unpredictable, and likely to burn anyone who touched them. Others laughed and said humanity was nothing more than a small flame, too weak to matter in the cold darkness of space. Still, whispers spread. Merchant captains claimed to have seen massive human ships on the edges of known space. Some said these ships dwarfed even the most advanced cruisers of the Council fleets. They called them Titans, though no one believed such stories. Most dismissed them as exaggerations made by frightened traders. Yet curiosity lingered. Could a young race really have built something the great powers did not control? Could a species dismissed as children rise so high in secret? The Council did not like unanswered questions, and so one quiet day they sent a fleet. It was not a fleet of war, at least not officially. They called it an observation mission. Dozens of sleek ships, silver and sharp like knives, entered human space. Their orders were simple: investigate, record, and report. If humanity was still weak, the Council would continue to ignore them. If humanity had grown stronger, then the Council would decide what to do. The aliens believed this mission would be easy. They expected to find small outposts, maybe a few warships, but nothing unusual. In their arrogance, they imagined humanity as a curious child playing with tools too advanced for them. But as the fleet crossed the borders of Sul, their confidence began to crumble. The first sign came from their sensors. Long-range scans froze as if the machines themselves were struck with fear. Something massive, something unlike anything they had seen before, appeared on their screens. It was not a fleet. It was one ship. The aliens stared in silence. Their eyes widened. Their voices faltered. The ship was so large that its shadow stretched across moons. Its armor was dark and scarred, as if it had survived battles against storms and fire. It looked ancient yet powerful, alive in its silence. On its side was a simple mark, a symbol of Earth, blue and green, the colors of oceans and forests, painted proudly on its steel skin. The alien commander could not believe it. This cannot be real," he whispered. His officers said nothing. Their flagship, mighty and feared, looked like a child's toy compared to the giant before them. They realized with horror that this was only one ship. If humanity could build one, perhaps they could build more. And if they had more, then the galaxy itself might tremble. The silence inside the alien ships was heavy. No one dared to speak too loudly. It felt as if even the stars were watching. One young officer finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet, filled with dread. If this is what they keep at their border, what lies deeper inside their space? No one had an answer, but one thing was certain. The first encounter with Earth's Titan-class warship had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The alien fleet moved carefully through the dark edges of Sol. Their silver ships glided like hunters, sharp and silent, their lights glowing faintly against the emptiness of space. They had been trained to expect danger, but what they felt now was something far worse: uncertainty. Every captain on those ships had served the Council with pride. They had crossed battlefields, escorted convoys, and carried the Council's flag to faraway stars. But as they entered human space, none of that mattered. For the first time in their lives, they were staring at something beyond their understanding. The Titan was waiting. It did not charge. It did not fire. It did not even move. It simply was. Enormous, silent, and powerful. Like a mountain in space, it floated calmly, as if daring them to come closer. The alien commander sat frozen in his chair. His breath was shallow, his eyes locked on the massive ship. His crew looked at him for orders, but he gave none. The fear inside the command deck was thick, pressing down on everyone. At last, one officer whispered, "Should we hail them?" The commander hesitated. To hail was to admit weakness. To ignore was to risk insult. But to attack, He quickly dismissed that thought. Even his pride was not foolish enough to fire at something that size. "Send a signal," he ordered finally, his voice heavy. A burst of sound traveled across the void. A simple message in the Council's official tongue: identify yourself. For long moments there was no answer. The Titan remained silent. Its black hull gleamed with faint starlight, scars of past battles etched into its steel. It looked less like a ship and more like a beast, ancient, patient, and watching. Then slowly a response came. It was not words. It was not threats. It was music. Through the alien comms, a sound filled the air. It was strange, unlike anything they had heard before. Rising voices, proud and strong, carrying emotion that words alone could never hold. It was Earth's anthem, the sound of humanity's soul echoing across the stars. The alien crew froze. Some felt confusion. Some felt fear. And some, though they would never admit it, felt a strange pull in their hearts. The music carried something raw, something alive. Hope, struggle, and defiance all woven together. This is no war cry," one officer muttered. "It feels like a promise," but the commander's face darkened. He understood the message. Humanity was not bowing. Humanity was not begging. They were declaring their presence, their pride, and their refusal to be ignored. The silence that followed was unbearable. The Council ships hovered at the edge of the Titan's shadow, small and fragile like children standing before a giant. One by one, the alien captains began to realize something. This was not just a warship. This was a statement. A line drawn in the stars. Humanity was saying, "We are here. We are strong. And we will not hide." The commander clenched his fists. He had been sent to observe, not to fight. Yet he felt as though the entire galaxy was watching him. If he retreated, the Council would call him a coward. If he attacked, he risked waking a monster that could not be contained. Fear whispered in his ear. Pride whispered in the other. But the Titan said nothing. It simply waited, its engines quiet, its guns silent. The alien fleet remained locked in place, staring at the giant before them, unable to move forward, unable to retreat. In that endless moment, they all knew the truth. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and the silence of Earth's Titan was louder than any weapon. On board the Titan-class warship Invictus, silence filled the massive command deck. Screens glowed softly, crew members worked with steady discipline, and at the center stood Captain Elias. His figure was tall and firm, his eyes fixed on the distant alien fleet. To many, the Invictus was just steel, weapons, and technology. But to Elias it was much more. It was the voice of Earth. It was the story of humanity carved into metal. The living proof that his people had fought, endured, and survived when no one else believed they could. As the alien signals echoed through the speakers, Elias did not rush to reply. He knew what the Council expected: fear, apology, or weakness. But humanity had walked too long in shadows. That time was over. He let his gaze drift across the command deck. Each officer at their station was young yet hardened. These men and women were the children of Earth's struggle. They carried the memory of famine, war, and endless rebuilding. Humanity had clawed its way out of ruin, and these officers had inherited the will to never bow again. Elias placed his hand on the railing, his voice calm but firm. "They will not see us as weak. They will see us as we are." The crew nodded. They trusted him, not only as their captain but as their symbol. The Invictus itself was more than a ship. It was a promise made to every human child that Earth would never again kneel before stronger powers. When the alien demand for identification arrived, Elias gave a simple order: transmit Earth's anthem. The crew obeyed, and through the void of space the proud music of humanity flowed like a river of fire. As the last notes faded, Elias closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, not the polished cities but the scars. He remembered the broken ruins left by old wars, the graves of millions, the hands of engineers building with little more than hope. Humanity had suffered, but they had never given up. They had built this Titan not for conquest but for survival. "Every bolt, every panel," Elias whispered, "is a piece of us." The officers nearby heard him, and their hearts swelled with pride. They knew what the Council thought of them: primitive, reckless, dangerous. But humanity had always been more than what others saw. They were survivors, And survivors build stronger than anyone else. The Invictus was proof. Its engines were born from desperate science. Its shields came from decades of trial and sacrifice. Its weapons were shaped not by ambition, but by the memory of helplessness. Humanity had vowed never again to be powerless. Now, standing before the Council's fleet, that vow was alive. One officer, a young woman with steady eyes, turned to Elias. "Captain, what if they fire on us?" Elias looked at her, his expression steady. "Then we show them that fear is no weapon against us. They must learn who we are." He did not speak of war. He did not speak of conquest. He spoke of respect, the respect humanity had earned through centuries of struggle. Outside, the alien ship still hovered in hesitation. Their commanders argued among themselves, but none dared to move closer. They had seen something they could not explain, a single ship standing unshaken before them, answering their demands not with threats, but with pride. Inside the Invictus, the crew waited. Their hearts beat with the rhythm of Earth's anthem, still echoing in their minds. They were no longer children in the eyes of the stars. They were the voice of a people who had bled and risen. Captain Elias straightened his posture, his eyes cold and determined. He knew the Council would panic. He knew fear would spread across the galaxy, and that was exactly the point. For too long, humanity had been ignored, dismissed, treated as less. Today, the galaxy had seen the truth. The Titan-class warship was not just steel. It was the weight of history, and history could not be silenced. Far across the galaxy, in the shining halls of the Council chamber, tension was heavy in the air. The Great Hall was built from crystal and steel, tall pillars rising toward a ceiling lit with holographic stars. For centuries, it had been a place of control and confidence. Here, the fate of worlds was decided with calm voices and firm authority. But today, the chamber trembled with fear. Delegates from dozens of species filled the seats. Their eyes glowed, their scales shimmered, their wings twitched nervously. They had all seen the same report. They had all watched the same recording. A single human warship, larger than any station, stronger than any fleet, floating in silence, answering demands with nothing but music. The images of the Titan filled the center of the chamber. Holograms of the Invictus rotated slowly, its black steel hull marked with scars. The delegates stared, some in disbelief, some in anger, but most in dread. One delegate slammed his clawed hand on the table. "This is impossible. No species builds such a thing alone. Who gave them this technology?" Another hissed in reply. "No one. They built it themselves. Look at it, crude, heavy, yet terrifyingly efficient. This is human work." The chamber erupted in voices. Some shouted that it must be destroyed. Others whispered that it must be studied. A few, trembling, suggested something more dangerous, that it must be respected. The Council leader, an ancient being with silver eyes, raised his hand. The voices fell into uneasy silence. His words were slow, careful, but heavy with unease. "For generations, we have called humanity reckless. We told ourselves they were too young to matter. But today we see what our arrogance has created." He gestured to the Titan. "This ship is not a weapon of war alone. It is a message." The humans did not ask for permission. They did not beg for guidance. They built this in secret, and they revealed it not with guns but with pride. A low murmur filled the chamber. Many could not accept it. How could a young race, a species barely known, build something greater than the oldest powers of the galaxy? One delegate leaned forward, his voice trembling. "If they can build one, how many more do they have? What if there are fleets of Titans waiting beyond their stars?" The thought spread like fire. Fear tightened every throat. The Council had been the unquestioned power of the galaxy for centuries. Now, for the first time, they felt small. An elder delegate, his skin cracked with age, spoke softly, almost to himself. "Perhaps this is what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons, but their will. They build because they must. They rise because they refuse to fall. We have always underestimated them." The Council leader closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw a galaxy ruled by fear of the humans. He saw their colonies trembling, their fleets hesitating. He saw the balance of power shifting, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Another delegate cried out, "We must act. If we do nothing, they will control us all." But another voice, sharp and calm, replied, "No, if we strike, we risk a war we cannot win. Tell me, who here is willing to fight a Titan and survive?" Silence. No one answered. The council chamber, once filled with confidence, was now filled with doubt. Each delegate looked at the others, but no one spoke again. The shadow of the Titan-class warship hung over them all. The council leader finally spoke, his voice trembling with something no one had ever heard from him before: fear. The humans have declared themselves. Whether we call them ally or enemy, the galaxy has changed, and it will never return to what it was. The chamber fell silent again. Some lowered their heads in dread, some clenched their fists in anger. But deep inside, every being in that room knew the truth. The council had ruled the stars for centuries. But now their reign was shaking, and the cause was not an empire, not an army, but a single ship built by the stubborn will of humanity. The alien fleet at the edge of Sol was no longer calm. Fear had turned into restless anger. Captains argued over the comms, voices sharp and tense. Some wanted to retreat, others wanted to attack, and a few demanded to wait for the council's orders. But pride is a heavy chain, and pride held them in place. The alien admiral sat in his command chair, his claws digging into the metal armrests. His heart pounded. Never before had he faced something that made him feel so small. The Titan-class warship floated ahead, silent and unmoving, yet it felt as though it watched him, measuring his every breath. His officers looked at him with pleading eyes. To do nothing was shameful. To retreat was worse. The admiral's pride whispered in his ear, "Show them you are not afraid. Show them the strength of the council." He gave the order. Fire a warning shot. Gasps filled the bridge, but no one argued. A single beam of energy burst from the alien flagship. It streaked across the darkness, bright as lightning, and slammed into the hull of the Invictus. For one moment, the aliens held their breath. And then... nothing. The energy beam faded against the Titan's shields, vanishing as though it had struck the ocean and sunk without a trace. The warship did not shake. Its shields did not flicker. The Invictus did not even turn its guns. It was as if the attack had never happened. The alien crew sat frozen in shock. They had fired with enough strength to cripple a cruiser, yet the Titan ignored it. The admiral's throat went dry. He could almost feel the eyes of his ancestors judging him. He had provoked a monster, and the monster had not even cared. On board the Invictus, Captain Elias stood silent, watching the attack ripple harmlessly across the shields. His officers waited for his command. Some expected him to retaliate, to unleash the fury of Earth's greatest warship, but Elias raised his hand. "No," he said firmly. "Not yet." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. He knew this was not the time to destroy. It was the time to show. "Engines," he ordered. The crew obeyed. Slowly, the Titan's massive engines came alive. They did not aim forward. They did not aim at the alien fleet. Instead, Elias ordered them to fire upward, into the empty void above. The result was a storm. The engines roared like thunder, releasing a blast of energy so powerful it shook the stars themselves. The shockwave rippled outward, slamming into the alien fleet like a tidal wave. Their ships, though sleek and agile, were tossed aside like leaves in a hurricane. Alarms blared, hulls groaned, and crews screamed as their vessels were pushed far off course. But the Invictus remained steady, unmoved like a mountain standing against a storm of its own making. When the shockwave faded, silence returned. The alien ships drifted, struggling to recover balance. No damage had been done, no lives lost, but the message was clear. The Titan had not fired its weapons. It had not destroyed. It had simply stretched its arms, and the galaxy had felt the weight of its power. The alien admiral's eyes widened in despair. He realized the truth. If humanity wanted, that ship could have erased them all in a single breath. Yet it chose mercy. That was not weakness, it was worse. It was control. One of his officers whispered the fear that sat in every heart. If this is their mercy, what will their wrath look like? The admiral could not answer. His pride was broken, his courage shattered. He finally understood why the council feared. On board the Invictus, Captain Elias lowered his hand. His crew looked at him with awe. He had not fired a single shot, yet he had won the battle of hearts. The aliens would never forget this lesson. Humanity did not need to scream to be heard. Humanity did not need to kill to be feared. The Titan had spoken in silence, and its silence was more powerful than war. The council chamber had always been a place of certainty. For centuries, the galaxy's rulers had sat in that shining hall, confident in their authority, Whenever a problem arose, they debated, they voted, and their word became law. No world had ever dared to resist them. But now the chamber felt like a cage filled with frightened voices. Delegates shouted across the hall, their voices overlapping, their fear twisting into anger. Some pounded their tables, others waved their arms, and still others simply stared at the great hologram in the center of the chamber. There it was, the human Titan-class warship. Invictus, its enormous black hull rotated slowly in the projection, every scar of its armor visible, every line of its colossal structure a reminder of human will. The recording of its engine blast played on repeat, showing council ships thrown aside like dust. Each time the image replayed, the silence that followed grew heavier. "They have defied us," one delegate shouted, his scaled face flushed with rage. "They humiliate our fleets, and still they dare to claim peace. This is mockery." Another slammed his fist. "It is worse than mockery. It is a warning. That was no random display, they chose mercy. And if they can show mercy, then it means they can also choose destruction." The words struck the chamber like a blade. Mercy. That single word terrified them all. If humans had unleashed their full power, the fleet would have been ashes. Instead, they showed restraint. That restraint was proof of control. The Titan had demonstrated dominance without bloodshed, and dominance without bloodshed was more frightening than war itself. One young delegate, her feathers trembling, rose from her seat. "We cannot win against such power. If we fight, we will be crushed. If we ignore them, we will look weak. What path remains to us?" The chamber fell into chaos again. Some cried for war, others for alliance, and a few for surrender. Pride clashed with fear, tradition clashed with survival. At last, the council leader stood. His silver eyes were tired, his voice heavy with the weight of a truth no one wished to hear. "We have ruled the stars for generations. We believed ourselves unchallenged. We told ourselves that humanity was reckless, too emotional, too small to matter, and while we spoke in arrogance, they built this." He gestured to the Titan's image. "This ship is not only metal. It is their history. It is their pain, their fire, their endless will to endure. And now that history stands before us," the chamber quieted. Even the loudest voices stilled, for his words touched the fear in every heart. Another elder delegate whispered softly, "What if they are not alone? What if there are more Titans hidden in their space?" That thought spread like a shadow through the chamber. More Titans, more giants waiting in the darkness. If one ship could humble an entire fleet, what could a dozen do? What could 100? The fear became unbearable. Some delegates called for a preemptive strike to destroy humanity before it was too late. Others argued that such an act would doom them all. A war with humans would not end quickly nor cleanly. It would spread like fire, and the galaxy itself would burn. Finally, the council leader raised his hand once more. His voice shook not with authority, but with something no one had ever heard in his tone before. Fear. "We are no longer deciding the fate of humans. We are deciding the fate of ourselves. If we choose wrongly, the galaxy as we know it will end." The delegates sat in silence, their wings folded, their claws lowered, their eyes dimmed. For the first time in living memory, the council, the masters of countless worlds, felt powerless. The shadow of humanity's Titan hung over them all, and no vote, no law, no decree could chase it away. The chamber that once ruled the stars now shook with the truth. The galaxy did not belong to the council. Anymore, it belonged to the future, and the future had a human face. The council, shaken and divided, finally sent a direct message. The galaxy demanded an answer. Every delegate agreed. Someone had to speak to the humans, even if fear weighed on every word. The message was short, spoken in the council's formal voice. "Why have you built such a ship? What do you want from us?" The words traveled across the void, reaching the Sol system. They carried pride, but underneath that pride was trembling. The council had never asked such questions before. They were used to giving orders, not seeking answers. On board the Invictus, the crew gathered as the message played. The bridge was silent. All eyes turned to Captain Elias. The moment had come, not to fight, but to speak for all of humanity. Elias stood tall. His face was calm, his voice steady, but his heart carried the weight of centuries of human struggle. He thought of Earth, its broken cities rebuilt, its deserts turned green again, its people united by survival and hope. He thought of the ancestors who had lived through hunger, through war, through despair, yet never surrendered. When he spoke, his words were not just his own. They were the voice of every human who had ever dreamed of the stars. "We do not want your thrones," Elias began. His voice carried strength, not arrogance. "We do not want your tribute. We do not want to rule your worlds." He paused, letting the silence fill the bridge. Outside, the massive Titan-class warship stood like a giant among the stars, its presence giving weight to every word. "What we want is simple," Elias continued. "We want peace. We want the right to walk among the stars without fear. We want our children to grow beneath the same sky as yours, without chains, without threats, without being told we are less." The crew listened, their hearts swelling with pride. This was why the Invictus existed, not to conquer but to protect the dignity of their people. "But hear me well," Elias said, his eyes hardening. "If you respect us, if you treat us as equals, then humanity will stand with you. We will fight beside you. We will share our hand in friendship." His tone shifted, cold, sharp, like steel drawn from its sheath. "But if you threaten us, if you try to break us, if you forget that we are survivors—" He raised his hand slowly, pointing toward the stars beyond the window. "Then the Titans of Earth will rise, and nothing in this galaxy will silence them." The words echoed through the comms. The bridge was silent. Even the crew, who had heard him speak many times, felt shivers run through their veins. On the alien fleet's ships, the officers sat frozen. They had heard speeches of war, threats of conquest, but this was different. The human captain had spoken with calm certainty, as if his words were carved in stone. He was not bluffing. He was not boasting. He was promising. Far away in the council chamber, the delegates listened in silence. For the first time in living memory, no one dared to interrupt. Some felt anger, some felt shame, but most felt something deeper: respect. The council leader bowed his head slightly. He had lived through centuries of power, centuries of dominance, but never before had he felt so small before another race. Humanity had spoken and the galaxy had listened. The chamber remained still. No vote was called. No law was passed. For once, silence was the only answer they could give. On board the Invictus, Captain Elias lowered his hand. His crew exhaled softly, relief mixing with pride. Humanity had not declared war, but they had declared themselves. The Titan drifted quietly, engines glowing faintly, its shadow stretching across the void. It did not fire, it did not chase, it did not need to. The message was already written in the stars. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never forget the day it first heard Earth's reply.